It's about time that I convert Abaddon into a Night Lord's Terminator Lord. I've already done the same for the Iron Warriors and Word Bearers. I'll put some nice pictures of them over here, and those videos are of course on the channel. So now it's time for the Night Lords to also get a proper Terminator Lord, because my thinking is if you're playing Black Legion, any of the detachments really, and you have a nice Night Lord's painted army, you don't want that loser Abaddon to show up in your army. You want a proper Night Lord's Terminator Lord. And he needs a little bit of a cleanup. I mean, I don't mind Chaos Undivided symbols on a Night Lord's mini Terminator Lord, especially, you know, they can have a little bit more corruption and changing of the armor, but this Eye of Horus definitely needs to go. Now, Abaddon for some reason never wears a helmet, so I've got to snip off this part of his head because, of course, my Night Lord's Terminator will have a proper helmet. And the helmet, of course, comes from the Nemesis Claw kill team, but I'm gonna see if I can take these wings off so that the helmet fits better. But also, it will give me a couple of these wings to use on other parts of the armor. But Terminator helmets, they sit pretty deep into the Terminator armor, so I'm gonna have to cut off part of the back of this helmet so that I can shove it in deep enough to also make that front sort of rim trim of the armor fit onto the cavity for the helmet. So just gotta flatten this a little bit and then I can pop it in. There, that fits okay. He's in there with a bit of poster putty, not with glue, so I can still move the head, tilt it up and down, and maybe even still shave it a little bit more. I want to make sure that once I have the pose and everything down, he can look at something. He's not just staring blankly ahead, but he actually is interacting with his environment and makes more sense with his pose. Now, it's time for some weapons. Now, usually when I convert a character, I want to keep the profile very similar and also the look and feel so that you can see, okay, this is Abaddon, but he is a Night Lord. But I did that already twice. Once with the Iron Warriors Abaddon, you know, he has one weapon and one claw, and the Word Bearers Abaddon who has this demon claw and then a mace, flaming mace, of course. I don't really want to do that again. I mean, I can get a really cool two-handed glaive, a really big one from the Exalted Eightbound kit, which would fit really nicely, or use this one over here, this beautiful sword, and stick it on a pole, or this one over here. There's a lot of options, but I don't really want to do this again, having a glaive and one lightning claw. So since it's a Terminator from Night Lords, why not just give him dual lightning claws? And no, I didn't just buy an extra Abaddon box for a second lightning claw. This is from my Word Bearers Abaddon because he has a Demon Prince claw. Now the issue is of course that it's a right-handed claw, so I've got to move some of these nails around. So this one, the pinky, shifts to the other side, and I'm just going to put it in line with the rest of the claws. And the thumb just gets tacked on to the other side, kind of bent in the same way that it's bent on his right hand, so that it looks more like a proper left hand, like this. Now the cover of the claw does a lot to cover this up and make it look good enough, but they are very fragile, so I'm gonna have to reinforce them some way, maybe with some chain or some green stuff, but I think like this, it looks okay if you hold them next to each other. You clearly have a left hand and a right hand claw. So gotta let this dry, and then let's see how we can pose Abaddon. So what I'm gonna try to do here is I want him standing kind of with his claws down, very similar to my Iron Warriors Abaddon, like this, but on the other side as well, kind of looking down. Maybe he's standing on top of a building and ready to jump down. And even a Terminator, a Night Lord's Terminator, would jump down onto his opponents. I think that would be pretty cool. And since I've done this before with the Iron Warriors Abaddon, it's not that hard for me to get this done. I just have to snip this arm off here, right next to the part where the shoulder pad connects, and this arm as well. And then I can just stick these claws onto him. Now with a little bit of poster putty, later with a bit of green stuff. And he has this massive, massive shoulder pads that will cover up a lot. And really anything that, you know, when you're kitbashing Night Lords, anything you can't cover up, you just put a flap of skin over there. So let me get this claw in place. You can kind of see the pose that I'm going for. Oh god, these claws, this thumb and this pinky, it's so fragile. I gotta be so careful I don't break them. Maybe I gotta wait until it's completely glued, but look at that pose. That is what I would love to see in a Night Lord's Terminator Lord. See, with the shoulder pads on there, again, poster putty, but with the shoulder pads, he looks pretty cool, and I like this pose. Just imagine him standing a little bit bigger, a bit taller, looking over the edge of a building. And this is also a good thing that I kept the head not glued on there, because the head needs to be tilted down a little bit more. So I do have to shave some of the back of his helmet so I can tilt him. But first, since this claw needs to dry, I'm gonna work on the shoulder pad. You know the winged skull? Well, I still have the wings, where are they? Here, of the helmet that I used from the Nemesis claw. And I'll just grab a skull from the Games Workshop skulls box. And I'm gonna see if I can fit this together onto the shoulder pad. So I've already scraped here the eye of Horus of the shoulder pad, make a nice flat surface. And I'm gonna see if I can cut off the back part of this skull and sort of keep the face of the skull. There we go. Get a nice flat surface here as well. Well, let me clean up. It's a nice flat surface here as well. And then I think I can just stick this onto the shoulder pad right in the center, like so. I think that's a good position. Now, the wings, they fit nicely right here. I'm gonna see if I can get them a little better attached to the shoulder pad and less attached to the skull, because otherwise this is gonna fall apart. As soon as I dry brush anything, I'll just knock the bits off the Terminator. But like this, I think I've got something going here. That, I think, is recognizable even from a long distance as a Night Lord symbol on the shoulder pad. And then instantly, he is a proper Night Lord's Terminator. Now, he needs to have a lot more trophies than what he has now. And I'm going to start with this sort of belt of skulls here. Now, to get these skulls to fit on the Mini properly, I'm going to clip off these parts at the back a little bit. So they're a little bit flatter and they can sit a bit closer to the Mini. Otherwise, you have this big bulb and it has a very small contact point with the rest of the Mini, and they're going to fall off. And so now all that's needed is to just stick them on here in a nice sort of belt pattern, and also connect it a little bit to that skull that's already hanging there. And I'll also add this head on a hook that comes from Pete the Wargamer's Dead Animal Bits sprue. I want to give it a little bit more of a center position like that. And then it needs to be finished off with a bit of hobby chain. And I'm using 1.5 mil, so pretty much the smallest gauge I can find. And I'm just gonna drop it in here, and that will already make it look like these skulls are connected to the chain. You don't have to make it fit perfectly and make it look like it's perfect and attach the chain to every single skull. Just make it look like it could make sense that there's a draped sort of chain here with these skulls hanging on them. Sticking with the dead animal bits, I'm gonna add a little hand on a hook to that shoulder pad, because I think for some reason I like the idea of Night Lords collecting hands just as well as heads. Time for the trophy rack. You know, Abaddon has this massive trophy rack, like this one over here from my other Abaddon. But I'm a bit torn. I don't know which one to take. I have this flag over here from the regular ghouls and this flag over here from these Moorbag Knights. And they're both really, really cool. But I need to figure out which one I'm going to use for his trophy rack. I settled on the one from the Knights. Take a look. I think this is a pretty cool banner for him to carry. But now the rest, the trophy rack is really missing. It needs more spikes, skulls on spikes, body parts on spikes, just spikes in general. And I could take like a regular Chaos Terminator's trophy rack, but I've got these left over from Demon Prince sprue. So I'm gonna see if I can fit these trophy racks on him. I think it would make him look particularly brutal. Well, that doesn't fit. See, I can fit it here like this, but then it's sticking out on the back, or I can fit it on the back and then it's sticking out weirdly up top. I don't really want to cut this piece in 2 or 3 to stick it on, because that would be a waste of a really nice bit to put in my bits box for, I don't know, another Demon Prince sometime later. So let's see if maybe the Abaddon trophy rack is the way to go. So with the banner, this would be it, and I'm not a fan. I don't think this works. I think this is getting way too high. I really want to get the banner much lower, like right there, so it doesn't have this massively high profile. So let's look at the Chaos Terminator trophy racks. So these will have to do. It has a nice Imperial Guardsman helmet on there anyway, which would look pretty cool on a Night Lord's Terminator, I think, you know. They like to hunt the weak and, you know, not a Space Marine helmet, but an Imperial Guardsman helmet. I think that works. Not what I had in mind originally, but I think it works actually really well. I like the fact that he has these spikes on his shoulders, because they almost remind me of the winged skull icon of the Night Lords, like this. I think it looks pretty cool. I just think he needs to have a little bit here in the middle. But I'm not just gonna glue a skull on there, I'm gonna nail it into the armor. This is not my idea originally. I've stolen this from the Eons of Battle channel. These are sewing pins without that colored little ball on top of it. So they're flat and they look like tiny nails. So all you've got to do is drill a little hole in top of the skull and then super glue the tip of that sewing pin in there. And now you've got a skull with a nail through the head, and that you can just glue onto the armor, like so. And now you've got a skull nailed to the armor. I think it's a really cool way to attach skulls to minis, and much better than just gluing the skull in place, because how would it stick there? Now, I'm quite happy with how he looks, but he definitely needs a big flowing skin cloak. And I got two options here, or 3 or 4 actually, but 2 that I want to take a proper look at. And it's this skin cloak over here. This comes from the Warcry warband called the Royal Beast Flayers from Flesh Eater Cords. Now, Flesh Eater Cords is a good source for any skin bits. And I didn't just come up with this right now. I have a video on my channel going about all the Night Lord's kits that you can use for proxies, conversions, kitbashes, and so on and so forth. So if you want to see more Night Lord's kitbashing content or get some inspiration, that's a good video to watch after this one. Now the problem with this cloak is of course the hand here that's attached to it. The character's kind of holding onto his cloak. But that's okay, I think I can get rid of this. But the other problem is over here. It stops quite abruptly because you need to attach it to these 2 pieces here that make the weapon for the character that's holding it. But there's some nice loose dangling hands on there as well. So I'm gonna see if I can get those separately and then just glue them in place where they're supposed to go, like this. Now he's got an arm dangling free, a little bit of chain. That's the arm of the character holding it. I might have to get rid of that as well, but we'll see later. But this only covers about half of his backside, like that. And you know, that's not good enough. I want this nice big flowing cape, just as Abaddon has. So for that we'll go to the Nemesis Claw, and I'll also get this skin cloak from that upgrade sprue. I just have to clip off this part of the cloak that makes up part of the backpack of the regular Marines. But then when I attach it here, I've got this massive gap over here. I mean, it looks pretty cool from the front, like a pretty short cloak, short cape. But from this side it just looks silly, and it would be quite a lot of work to get a green stuff sculpt going and make my own cape. So I think I just have to go for the Abaddon cloak and see if I can modify it a little bit to make it look like this cloak over here, like it's been stitched together from different patches of skin. So I'm just going to follow this example that has long stuff going down and then a little bit of diagonal. So I'm just going to make a little scratch over here and sort of make my own knitted pattern cloak. I don't know if you can see it properly on this top-down camera, but I got a couple lines going, and I'm just going to use my knife to carve them out a little bit more, make them a little bit more visible. I thought it might be worth recording this in case somebody wants to learn to do this themselves. So I cut these grooves and then I go in there with a little bit of this cement, this plastic cement from Tamiya. It's just plastic glue, and that will melt the little bit of plastic that's around it. And then with my drill, I'm just going to scratch out this groove a little bit more. So the plastic cement, the glue melts the plastic, and then I just sort of scratch it out of that groove. And so this way I get a nice, relatively smooth groove, and I don't have to cut all the time and make big scratches into this cloak. For the stitches, I'm just getting a very thin strand of green stuff, and I'm going to add a couple of them just across that groove that I carved earlier. And so the stitching is done. It's a bit coarse, the threads are quite big, but I think with the right paint scheme, I have some ideas here, I can make it work and make it look pretty gruesome as well. Now I got some green stuff left over. I can use that to attach the arms to the body. I'll definitely do that. But I also want to see if I can add a little bit more skin flaps to the arm. I think here, that leg that is stepping forward, it would look cool if that already is a gruesome bit on the miniature. So all I do here is just get a nice flat piece of green stuff, rip the edges so that it looks like some flayed skin, and then I can just stick it on right here. I just left a good chunk to sort of hook behind that armor plate of his leg. And then the rest I'm gonna pull tight and rip off whatever doesn't fit. And then I'm gonna see if I can turn this into a face. So I'm just gonna poke a hole over here and another one just next to it. And he has a bit of a nose slash mouth. I wanna make it look like the skin is properly stretched. So the eyes are also stretched open. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Time for attaching the arms, and I think it looks pretty brutal like this. Massive claws, the banner sticking out, but I noticed I'm running into a little issue with the cloak. See, the cloak of Abaddon goes over his shoulder and then sort of hits the corner there. And I had these nice spikes here from the trophy rack. I just had to clip them off so I can see if I can fit the cloak on here a bit better, because the cloak already doesn't have a lot of attachment points. It's just a few points on the shoulder pads and under the other shoulder pad. And it's supposed to attach to Abaddon's trophy rack, but yeah, that's not gonna happen because I don't have his trophy rack. But I think like this, I can have it sort of go over this shoulder pad. Time to paint some grimdark Night Lords, but I wanted to show you this thing. This is one of my latest kitbashes, a massive mobile shrine to Khorne on top of a Lord of Skulls. If you haven't seen that video yet, I recommend you check it out. It's probably my best kitbash so far. Anyway, grimdark Night Lords. So of course that begins with a layer of Night Lords blue, roughly applied all over, followed by a highlight of marine blue and a little dry brush on the edges of Elysian blue. These two paints are from the Toothing Coats range. The armor trim gets a layer of Iron Warriors and a little dry brush of silver. And I think that's a pretty quick and neat way to get a sort of grimdark, decent looking Night Lord skin, but of course I'm gonna take it much further. I'm gonna start with a wash for this wash for NATO vehicles from AK Interactive. It's a bit bluish gray and it's a nice way to darken down. And I follow that up with a panel liner that's even darker than the wash, and I use this really to just line the panels. I reduced the enamel paints quite significantly, especially here on the top. Just with some white spirits I wiped it off to get some of those highlights back. And now it's time to paint everything Celestra grey that I want to have a nice bright accent. So the skulls, the head, the hand over there, but also the Night Lord's icon on his shoulder pad. All of that is going to have to be quite bright because it will make the armor look even darker. So it just needs a layer of Celestra grey first. And after that I gave most of it a layer or two of white, and now it's time for these beautiful wings. This is Khorne red, and then after shading it with the same panel liner I used for the rest of the armor, it gets a little highlight with Mephiston red. It's time for some flayed skin. The cloak, the banner, the other part of the cloak, the little flap he has on his front and on his leg. I'm gonna do it all and I'm gonna show you how to do this. I got 4 different skin paints. You can do with 3, but since I got 4, I'm gonna use them all. This is Bugman's Glow. I got Cadian Flesh Tone, Kislev Flesh and Flayed One Flesh. And it's very simple. I'm just going to stipple all of this on there, followed by some Flayed One Flesh, and I just keep going and going. Cadian Flesh Tone, Kislev Flesh, and back to the lightest Flayed One Flesh. Nice, that's a pretty basic skin effect, but it still lacks a lot of shading. And of course, this cloak is stitched together from different parts, and I want to make sure that they look differently. So I've got some Reichland Flesh Shade for this part here, some Seraphim Sepia over here, some Agrax Earth Shade over here, some Targor Rage Shade over here, and I've got a nice cloak with a little bit of variety in the skin color, not too much because I want to make it all nice and bright so it contrasts well with the armor. And now these stitches, they are really chunky, much more so than if you use the proper cloak from Games Workshop. So I'm gonna see if I can paint these stitches as intestines, because I think that's something Night Lords would do. You know, make everything even more horrible than it already is. So I just painted it white, and now with a very diluted zombie gore, sort of dark version of Blood for the Blood Gods, but from Toothing Coats, I'll go over it and make them look nice and slimy. It needs a bit of color variation, so I'm gonna add a little bit of Druchii Violet here and there, just so that you don't have this only red here. And time for some more gore effects. This is Carrion Crimson, an enamel from the Grimdark Compendium. It's Villainy Inks brand. And this is really great for getting these sort of edges of the cloak look nice and worn and torn. And it's not only good for making this cloak look a little bit more gory, it's also really great for coagulated blood, because it dries up pretty dark and there's these chunks of pigment in there. So I'm just gonna do this here around the lightning claws. Not on the claws, because I'll have people screaming in the comments that these power weapons, they burn off the blood instantly. But around it, where the blood might hit the hands and the rest of the mini, that's where it's going to have some dried up blood. And a bit of Ichor of the Damned on the fringe of the cloak, where it might be dragging along the floor, where it picks up dust and dirt. just to give it a little bit of that edge. And I'm gonna continue with the enamels with some Goon's Grime on all of these skulls. I washed them first with some Seraphim Sepia, Agrax Earthshade, just to give them some different tones, make them look slightly different. And that way you can get a little bit of variety, because otherwise it looks like all these skulls were all collected at the same time or from the same guy, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It needs to be like a varied set of trophies that come from all different places. And so they look all different as well. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of rust. I know Night Lords aren't known for their rusty equipment, but this chain, for example, that the skulls are hanging from, I think it could rust through. And it's more a case of it's old and a Night Lord doesn't really care too much if his trophy chain is starting to rust. He's not gonna immediately find a replacement. So it gets to rust a little bit more. Same with these hooks that are hanging off his armor, that are carrying these trophies. Little bit by little bit, I'm gonna give him some rust. I've got a problem. I was dry fitting everything and I noticed that both of the power claws get in the way of the cloak. Check it out. This power claw is supposed to go there and it just pushes the cloak too far back so that it doesn't fit here anymore, doesn't properly align there anymore. So I had to rip that one off. But then if all of this fits nicely and this is good enough, I'm okay with this gap here. I can say, you know, the cloak is ripping apart. But then over here, this is supposed to fit under the shoulder pad. As you can see on this guy, it's supposed to go right under. And that just doesn't work anymore because of that power claw. So I think what I'm gonna do instead is drill a couple of holes in the cloak right there and there. And then I glue it all in place with some super glue. And I have done the banner as well right now because I want to make sure that everything's in place and I don't make another mistake like this that might screw things up pretty badly again. And I think I can even close the cape like this, but this is now in place. And I'm just going to take 2 more of those nails that I used for the skull and drop them into the 2 holes that I drilled. Oh, hang on, I gotta go find my nail. There he is. And I just drop it here into the hole. There, I got him. And I'm just gonna drop it into the hole, or at least right next to it, and then try to get it in with my tweezers. And the cloak is nailed into place. I think it's a pretty elegant solution for a little mistake I made. Yeah, posing 5 different components all at the same time, making sure they all fit. It's too hard to do. So now I just gotta fix this claw over here. But I think that one is pretty easy. All I've gotta do is clip off this, let's see, I'm on the right side. Yeah, this part of the trim. And then it should fit right underneath there again. Okay, that's fixed. He's drying. I definitely have to touch up the cloak here and there. And those nails, of course. I'm just gonna make them rusty. But what I like on the Nemesis claw, there's this one guy who has like a skull painted onto his helmet. So I'm gonna try and do the same for this guy. So I got the nice flat dry brush, and with white, I'm just put it down and drag it down like that. And make it look like he has painted part of his face to look like a skull. And I just cleaned it up a little bit next to his mouth so that it's black. And now his eyes, I want to make them look bright red. Then the head needs to be put in place and looking the right way. I need to turn him a little bit because right now I think he should be looking that way. Although this is a pretty cool pose too. Yeah, I actually like the pose. So he needs a little bit of blood spatter. So I'm just gonna flick on a little bit of zombie gore, the dark blood, because it also looks immediately like it's been drying up a bit. Nice. Now he's a little bit more gory. Now I've been looking at him for a while, working on all the skin cloaks, and I feel like the blue just isn't interesting enough. There isn't enough highlight. So I'm taking some more of this, what's it called? Marine blue. And I'm just going to highlight a little bit here and there, especially on the front, especially these bits that stick out a bit more, like the gun. I just want to make it pop a little bit more. Time for the base. And initially I said I would love to have him standing sort of on a ledge, looking down, ready to jump down on some unsuspecting victims. But I also want to make him playable. I want him to be sort of the same height as Abaddon. So this is Abaddon's original base, and this is already a little bit higher because of the book. But this guy, if he would be standing much higher, he would be really much higher. And people might not want to be able to play with him. And one day I plan to sell these miniatures on eBay or through my Patreon or something to at least recover some of the cost of these kit bashes. So, you know, it's going to be a more playable base. So I got some blocks here from XPS foam, and I'm just going to dry brush the stone first with some Mechanicus standard gray, and followed by a dry brush of Celestra gray. I then wash it in the same way that I've done the miniature, with some wash for NATO vehicles and the panel liner. Now I want to make this base look like a dreary, wet castle of some Sylvanian vampire that he is standing on top of. So I'm going to see if I can get some moss effects going, and I'm just going to stipple on some of this typhus corrosion, or sorry, not typhus corrosion, corrosion texture in places where I think moss could grow. And then some slimy grime dark from AK Interactive will turn it into a nice dark and wet moss. And I'm also going to use this to get some streaks going in places on these blocks. And if it's raining, then this rusted cable is spilling rust onto the pavement as well. So I'm just going to add some rust streaks around it, feather that nicely, and just make it look like it's been giving off these rust streaks all over. And after a little bit of gloss varnish on the stones to make them nice and shiny and wet looking, my Night Lord's Abaddon now looks like this. And I'm really happy with how he turned out. I had some trouble along the way with the trophy racks first, and I settled on the Chaos Terminator trophy rack, and then with the cloak that didn't fit, and then I went for the Abaddon cloak and that didn't fit, but it worked out well in the end. And painting the stitches and his intestines does a lot to make the cloak look even more gruesome. I'm quite happy with the results. That banner pole that's sticking out above him from the flesh eater cords. I mean, if I had a Night Lord's army and I wanted to convert and add to all of the bits and pieces, I would just get a flesh eater quartz spearhead box and use it for bits. It's amazing. Those little dudes, the gribblies, you can use them even as cultists. Those big bat mounts, you could use them maybe as spawns or as base for a demon prince or something cool. There's so much in there that you can use. You can just even clip off the hands and bones and use them as trophies to hang on your Terminators or on your regular Marines or your Nemesis Claw, and just make your Marines look even more like Night Lords than they already do. Now, I've got a Discord up and running, which is really cool. There's a little community there. There's links in the description below. I post almost daily work in progress pics and updates, and you can also post your stuff. I would love to see more conversions and kit bashes, because I don't see enough of them, in my humble opinion. I've also got a Patreon and affiliate links in the description below if you want to support the channel. And I am working on a diorama next, a Trench Crusade diorama, because the Grimdark Compendium is having a competition, and I'd like to join that and just submit a little Trench Crusade diorama. That's going to be pretty cool, and until that's finished, maybe check out this video next.